Hey guys, welcome back to JDMods. Today we are doing the long-awaited manual swap GS300 driving video. It's been about 6 years since I first manual swapped this car. I've owned it for I think about 8 years. The automatic transmission wasn't doing it for me. I really wanted a manual one, but of course you can't buy them manual swapped. So I did a CD009 manual swap on this GS300. I bought the car with a 2JZ GTE already in it. Since then, of course, I've done upgraded turbo to precision 6266, 1000cc injectors, ECU masters, EMU, and it dynoed a few years ago at 520 wheel horsepower. Haven't done much to the setup since the dyno. I believe that video is on our channel, as well as lots of other videos on the build, including the manual swap process. But I've never done a driving video. So today I'm going to take you guys on a drive in my GS300 and talk about how I like the manual swap and show you guys some pulls. So for anyone new to the channel or who hasn't seen any videos on my GS300, I'll give you a super quick walk around to get you guys up to speed on the setup. And of course, if you are new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well as the like button. It really helps us out. So this is my 93 Canadian GS300. It has about 240,000 kilometers as of right now. I'll start by popping the hood because it is the most interesting part of this car. So this was swapped with a first generation Aristo 2JZ GTE. It is the non-VVTi motor, which is just the simpler, arguably easier to tune engine. Modifications include a 6266 single turbo with of course the big 4-inch intake, stock intake manifold, but I'm running 1000cc injectors on a radium fuel rail with a adjustable fuel pressure regulator. I have a Walbro 450 fuel pump. The ECU, like I mentioned, is ECU Masters EMU. I could only do that after the manual swap since it cannot control the automatic ECU, or the automatic transmission easily. You can piggyback them, but that's a different topic. We have an HKS DLI for the ignition spark. This little box here turns up the power of your stock igniters or your coil pack, So we're using stock igniters, stock coil packs with a NGK BKR7E plugs. Aside from that, it's just a simple 4-row 3-inch intercooler. We have an aftermarket aluminum radiator. I did a wire tuck, but just your very basic, in my opinion, 2JZ. For exhaust, I have pretty much a 3-inch downpipe with a 3-inch high flow cat. No resonator, but 2 mufflers. Walking around to the side a little bit, it's on some 18-inch replica T37s. I got these for a great deal and I've always loved the look of them, so they're staying. We got the Supra 4-pot brake upgrade. It's been repainted a single color. These used to be two-tone. I quite like the paint job, but it is old and due for a new color. In the rear, I'm running the Nitto Invo tires. These are 295/35 R18s. Pretty much the biggest tire I can run on these 10-inch wide wheels. Looks really good in my opinion. And we'll finish off the tour at the very rear of the car. Bit more of an aesthetic topic. We're running the Aristo 3-piece spoiler, Aristo rear bumper, and Aristo taillight garnish. I think that makes this car look nice and JDM compared to the USDM or Canadian market GS300s. And lastly, you can see the dual 4.5-inch tips. It is just a nice little treat if you know what you're looking for when this car drives by. To finish off the quick tour, let's take you guys inside the car. It's a little different than factory, so I'll show you guys what's going on. The first thing you'll notice is probably the driver's seat has been replaced with a Recaro seat I just got off of Kijiji. I don't really know what style this is or what it's out of, but I will say it's a lot lighter than the factory leather seat, and it holds you in a lot better with these bolsters, and it was only a $200 or so, so it's good money. We have a 2GS wheel, which, if memory serves me correct, is a slightly smaller diameter, and mine was pretty raggedy and old, so this gives it a nice racing feel. I used to have a racing wheel on here, but I didn't like it, so I like the OEM Plus look of this. For the shifter setup, I have an aftermarket aluminum, just like a shifter bezel, I guess you call it, just to fit the aftermarket, obviously, manual shifter. That goes up here to replace the stock ashtray, which is where I have my boost gauge and my air-fuel ratio gauge. And lastly, this kind of overkill switchboard here. These two do nothing. And this one's my fuel pump because I haven't taken the time to wire it into the ECU yet. These gauges are not hooked up yet, so disregard those. But aside from that, the interior is completely stock, which is just the way I like it. Alright, so now I'm driving my GS300. I'm going to talk to you guys about all the things I like and I don't like about it, especially relating to the manual swap. Alright, so I'm not sure what you guys will be able to hear, but I'll start by talking about the noise of the manual swap transmission. The CD009 transmission is notoriously loud. I don't know if it's like based off of a truck transmission like the R154. I'll put the windows up so you can hear maybe better. But if you can probably hear the exhaust in the turbo as well, but the transmission is very loud. I used to think it was like an input shaft bearing or something going wrong, but I've replaced all of the bearings and it's still quite noisy. So that's one thing to take into account if you're manual swapping your 2JZ powered Lexus or Toyota or whatever it is. But aside from that, the drivability is great. I went with the ACT HD clutch, which was a downgrade from the XT, the Extreme clutch. And even it, I find, is very harsh engagement, very on-off clutch, which makes it kind of hard to drive. I believe Ali mentioned that in her video. The manual swap GS300 is much tougher to drive. Here's a takeoff. It's very harsh engagement. Definitely my hardest manual car to drive, but obviously it comes with huge upsides. Great power transmission to the wheels, very snappy. The gearing is not great. I have the stock Aristo LSD in the rear, and the gearing is definitely way too short. First gear barely does anything except get you going. I really don't use first gear unless I'm completely stopped. If I'm rolling, I pretty much have to use second, which sometimes can be a bit too high of a gear, but it's what I have to do. And if I'm trying to race or take off quickly, I have to shift out of first really fast, and most of my low gears don't last very long before I'm smashing off the rev limiter. My rev limiter is the stock, I think it's around 7,000, so it's not super high. I do think I would benefit from either a higher rev limiter or different gearing ratio. Alright, on the topic of drivability, we'll also talk about the shifter a little bit. So you have to get a shortened shifter. I don't just mean short throw. Usually the CD009s are really long transmission, so your shifter will literally end up back here. So you got to get one that places it forwards significantly. So I went with the Serial 9, I think they call it the 999 shifter. I bought it once it came out. It's a pretty cool shifter. It's all billet. Really tight throws, which at first I liked, but when you're dailying a car, you don't necessarily want the first and third gear to be probably like a few millimeters away from each other. It makes it kind of hard to find the gear you want, a little bit too notchy in my opinion. Right after I bought this shifter, probably back in like 2017 or whatever, they made the version 2, so I can't comment on the new version of the Serial 9 shifter, but I would definitely spend some good time if you're doing this swap researching a shifter and knowing what you want. If it's a race car, short shifting is great fun, but for a daily driver, it can get annoying, especially in traffic, shifting between second and third all the time. I've never misshifted or money shifted, but I definitely worry that I will. This shifter does have reverse lockout, so you have to push down and go over for reverse, which is quite nice. So I would definitely recommend getting a shifter like that. And I guess the only other thing with the shifter is you have to check if it works with your stock shifter trim, because mine didn't, so I had to make this custom aluminum piece, which I like, but I will be switching it out probably this winter season for something that looks a little more OEM plus, because I'm getting kind of tired of the light shining off into my eyes. All right, I'll give you guys a little pull starting in first gear to give you an idea of the gearing. Here we go. Alright, so here's a little third gear roll. I'll roll into it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed those quick little pulls in the Aristo. The one from outside the car, I kind of rolled into it on first because the tires I have on it right now are Nitto, I think they're the NT555s. Don't quote me on that, or NT01s, I can't remember. They're the street tire, and even though they're 295 width, at the power level it's at right now, they do have a hard time putting the horsepower to the ground in first and second gear. Usually by third I'm okay. So I kind of tried to roll into first just so that it didn't look like a big old burnout. I think I still trimmed the tires a little bit. Of course, the nice thing about the manual transmission is you can control your traction, in my opinion, a little better than in an automatic by choosing your gearing and such. So now I'll talk about if you want to do the swap by yourself. Okay, so the last thing I will talk about on today's video is just my lessons learned and my advice to anyone who wants to do the manual swap on their Lexus, for argument's sake, as well. So when I did this swap back in, I think, 2016, pretty much the only option available was the Collins kit. I believe they were one of the first companies making the adapter swap kits. There wasn't anything available for the first gen GS300, so I think I used a second gen GS300 and modified it to suit. But I believe now you can buy a Collins adapter kit for pretty much any 90s, early 2000s Lexus, whether it has the 2JZ GTE, 1UZ, GE 2JZ. They offer lots of swap kits for all the different chassis, and they also offer different swap kit options. When I did mine, it was all bolt together, very minor, like drilling of starter bolts and stuff like that. The one biggest annoying part was having to hammer the transmission tunnel. You have to do a lot of hammering, and I probably still didn't even do enough because it's still touching it to this day when you put the motor and transmission in. And you also can't drop the transmission. You have to take the whole motor and trans out, which is a little annoying. Since I bought my swap kit, I believe they released one where you can cut the bell housing off the CD009 and bolt on the 2JZ J2 bell housing. And I bet you this will work a lot better because it saves all the hammering of your transmission tunnel. And I don't know for sure, but you might be able to drop the transmission without pulling the motor, which would be huge. Like last year, I had to do the throwout bearing. For some reason, it went kind of prematurely, in my opinion. So I had to pull out the entire engine and transmission, which is quite annoying. So that would be a pretty cool upgrade. And I believe there's also other companies offering these swap kits. So do your research if you want to do it yourself. It is quite pricey, but compared to the stock Toyota transmissions, which would be the V160 or the R154, I think it is still a better deal. Even if you can get your hands on a V160 or an R154, which is more realistic, they're older transmissions, getting harder to find parts, and they don't hold as much power as a CD09 or the newer options. I believe you can do it with a BMW ZF transmission, which is a much smaller transmission. Look into kits for those transmissions as well if you're interested. Aside from that, the hardest part, I would say, would be mounting the clutch pedal on a car that never came with a manual option. So there's no room on the firewall to drill your holes and mount the clutch master cylinder and pedal. I ended up just having to take out my e-brake, which is a foot pedal e-brake, and custom fab in a box to mount it in. If you're starting out with an IS or SC chassis, those were offered in manual, so chances are your firewall has a knockout hole for the clutch pedal, so that's a great place to start. If you don't have a chassis and know you want a manual, swap one. Maybe pick a chassis that came in manual. Aside from that, feel free to watch the older videos we made when doing the manual transmission swap. I'm sure you'll learn something, hopefully you do anyway. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about my manual swapped 2JZ GS300. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video. And if you want to see more content about this car or any of the other cars on this channel, please comment down below. And as always, thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.